The Rangers finally made a signing. They did it. Kirby Yates is a Texas Ranger. On today's show, we're breaking down what that means for the Rangers bullpen and why Chris Young is saying that the Texas Rangers have unfinished business right after winning the World Series. All that and more on this episode of Locked On Rangers. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Rangers, your daily Texas Rangers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are locked onto the World Series champion Texas Rangers. I'm Bryce Patrick, a cripplingly addicted Texas Rangers fan covering this team for 10 seasons, including all 5 as the founder and host of this podcast. Thank you all so much for making Locked On Rangers your first listen every single day. If you're not already, you can follow me on Twitter at Bryce Patrick. You can follow this show at Locked On Rangers. Hit subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform and on YouTube, where the best way you can help grow the show is to comment nearly any single thing below. Now, on today's show, we are talking about finally, it only took, 3 days of the winter meetings for the Rangers to make a single signing, but we're here. Kirby Yates is a Texas Ranger, signed to a 1-year, $4.5 million deal. He is a one-time All-Star. He is a guy who has gotten Cy Young votes in one season. He is coming off of a pretty solid season with the Braves, and for basically a 2-year stretch in 2018 and 2019, he was one of, if not the best relievers in all of baseball. In 2019, he was most definitely the best reliever in all of baseball, in my very humble opinion. This is a guy who is a little bit older. He is coming off a couple of seasons with the Atlanta Braves, where he pitched really just this past year. He's coming off Tommy John surgery, which he had his second Tommy John surgery back in March of 2021. He didn't come back until August of 2022. This is a solid flyer deal, a 1-year, $4.5 million deal for a guy who is 36, turning 37 at the end of March. He is a guy who grew up in Hawaii, and he has some fun nicknames. This is one of my favorite parts of Baseball Reference. Is his nicknames are Curbs, which is obvious and boring, or Chubbs Sr. I have no idea where that comes from, and I'm really hoping that one of the beats asks him whenever he comes over here. But last year, he had a solid season with the Braves. Was not their closer, was more of a 7th and 8th inning guy, kind of medium or high leverage. He was used in a whole bunch of different situations, but he had a really good year with the strikeouts. The problem was the walks. He has walked a lot of guys last year, and before he was not a guy who walked a whole lot of people. He had pretty good command, especially in those years where he was at his peak. He had 1.9 walks per 9 and 15 strikeouts per 9 in his one All-Star season back in 2019 when he saved 41 games. He has been a closer. That was a 2019 Padres team that was not that good. I believe they had around 70 wins, and he closed out 41 games. So you do the math. He was closing out a whole lot of those games. But this year, he had 5.5 walks per 9 and 11.9 Ks per 9. That is a tightrope balance, not a guy who you really want in the 8th inning of these super high leverage situations, but I think he would be fine. He's not a guy who throws very hard. His profile is he throws 94 miles an hour, which might not sound like a guy you can use in high leverage situations, but his fastball is not his best pitch. It pairs very well with his best pitch, which is a splitter. Not a pitch that a whole lot of guys throw, but he throws it very, very effectively when he was at his peak. He had very good command, got a lot of strike threes looking. Last year, he had 80 strikeouts in 61 innings. Really solid numbers. Not a whole lot of hits against him. The expected batting average was in the top 10% of baseball. He got a good amount of swings and misses. The chase rate wasn't quite as good last year, and the barrel rate, he was hit a little bit harder, a little bit less good with the ground balls. He's also got a slider, which he threw literally 1% of the time last year. So he's 54% fastball, 45% what they call a changeup, which is really just his splitter. It is his off-speed pitch. He doesn't have an actual true changeup, but he is just murderous on lefties as well. As a right-handed pitcher, that is a valuable thing, a guy who can match up against either-handed type of batter. He was used in the 8th inning in 27 games last year for the Braves, in the 7th inning 15 times, and the 9th inning 13 times, and the 6th inning 8 times. So not a whole lot of times outside of the 7th and 8th inning, mostly those kind of innings. And right now, the A side of the Rangers bullpen looks like this. Your top three guys, if you're winning a game and your starting pitcher goes 6 innings, which you hope would happen a decent chunk, and it's close, you have your top three guys of Kirby Yates, Josh Sborz, and Jose Leclerc. That's solid. Those are guys who, well, two of them, well, I guess three of them. Kirby Yates did pitch in one playoff game. Didn't do all that well against the Phillies, but wasn't horrible. But Josh Sborz and Jose Leclerc have a decent track record in the playoffs. A pretty solid track record in the playoffs. And then the underside, the B side, if the Rangers are losing in a game or need some higher leverage innings or needing somebody for the 6th inning as well. The other guys in their bullpen, I think at this point, would probably be Brock Burke, Jonathan Hernandez, Antoine Kelly, and Cody Bradford. There's some other options there. If the Rangers want to go with Grant Anderson or Mark Church or Chase Lee, Yuri Rodriguez, or maybe even Zach Kent, it's fine. It's not great. You'd like to have basically one more top-end option because as much as I love Josh Sborz, there was still some real concerns about him during the regular season. Leclerc, I feel really solid about, feel really confident about with him being the Rangers closer. Yates, I feel pretty solid and confident. This will be the second full year after Tommy John surgery. Usually the second year is when the command starts to come back. And so if the Rangers get one of the better versions of him and the command is better and he's not walking everybody, that is a trustworthy. He might even surpass Leclerc as the Rangers closer or surpass Sborz as the Rangers 8th inning guy. Definitely some good upside there. And because he never relied on throwing all that hard, you don't have to worry about him kind of falling off. The strikeouts have still been there. It'll be his age 37 season. So I think this is a solid deal, especially at $4.5 million. But I'd still like the Ranger to get one more reliever, probably a lefty. I mean, this would all be fixed if just Brock Burke would go back to his 2022 version of himself as opposed to whatever was happening last year. I have no idea what's happening last year. But again, that's kind of the whole deal with relievers is they're finicky. So not spending a whole bunch of money on Josh Hader and getting a guy like this who's got the upside at $4.5 million, I think that's great. What they did with Will Smith last year is like, oh, he's a guy who, at times he's not great, but he's got some really nasty breaking balls, and when he's on, he can be your closer and can be helpful, and he was for a good chunk of the season. Now, he wasn't in the playoffs in the back half, but he got the Rangers out helped them get out to that lead when the rest of the bullpen was even more of a mess than it was down the stretch. So, again, more bites of the apple with relievers. Spending a bunch of money on one closer is not my ideal solution. And so this is a good first move for the Rangers in this winter. I am assuming this is not the last free agent signing they make. I'm really hoping that's not the case because that would be very frustrating and annoying. But hey, I don't think the Rangers are done because, like Chris Young said, they have unfinished business. In a minute, we'll get to why he said that and why I think it's kind of silly and also a really good sign of the Rangers' mindset after winning the World Series. Right after this word from our sponsors. This episode is brought to you by Jase Medical. I know we come to sports to escape from some of the crazy realities of life. Can we just talk for a minute about preparing for tough situations? Whether you're on extended travel, bracing for a major weather event, or limited by yet another supply shortage, you are covered, my friend. Thanks to our partners at Jase Medical, lifesaving antibiotics and a long list of daily medications can be ordered in a 1-year supply. Jase Medical has the Jase Case. The Jase Case is a pack of 5 different antibiotics to treat a long list of bacterial illnesses, including UTIs, respiratory infections, sinusitis, skin infections, among others. This stuff could happen to any of us, so visit jasemedical.com and complete your physician encounter. It will be reviewed by a board-certified physician, and your medications will be dispensed by a licensed pharmacy at a fraction of the regular cost. It has never been more important to be prepared than today. Go to jasemedical.com and use offer code LOCKEDON to get $20 off your order. Shout out to the Everydayers for making Locked On Rangers your first listen every single day. On tomorrow's show, I'll be putting a nice little bow on the winter meetings. Maybe we'll even have some big news that will maybe involve the Rangers. I don't know. It's been a boring winter meetings, but we are making the best of it with all the content we can squeeze out. Like this article that I read from Kennedy Landry on MLB.com. It kind of caught my eye when I was on the Rangers homepage, just as I want to do every once in a while, just to see what kind of new Rangers World Series clips they're putting out there just to remind myself the Texas Rangers are indeed the reigning world champs. But that is not the casual mindset of Mr. Christopher Young. This is not his mindset of just being happy with one and, that was a great World Series and I'm just going to sit here and enjoy it forever. No, Chris Young is ready for more. He is hungry for more and he is not done. And apparently that is the mentality of the Rangers, because this article headlined by Kennedy Landry says even as champs, Rangers have, quote, unfinished business for 2024. And this is the quote from Chris Young that made me kind of squint and tilt my head a little bit and say, are you sure about that, Chris? He said, quote, I think we have ... We have unfinished business. We tied for the division and lost the tiebreaker, Chris Young said at Monday at the winter meetings, and thereby we were the wildcard team. I think it meant a lot to everybody to win the division. We're not taking anything for granted. We knew how hard it was this year, but also know how talented this team is. They're capable of doing special things, and this group is very motivated, end quote. Now, unfinished business, it implies that you left something on the table, and yes, the Rangers, in case you missed this of the 18,000 times that John Smoltz delighted to remind you that the Texas Rangers lost the division title on the final day of the season with that 1-0 loss to the stinking Seattle Mariners. They lost the division to the stinking Houston Astros, who were very, very high on their horse and probably celebrated a little bit too early about winning the division and then lost in the ALCS to the Texas Rangers. So I thought that was that. And then also the Rangers won the World Series. So I didn't think that, losing the division on the last day, I thought all that was done. I thought all of the heartbreak was done. I thought the pain of 2011 was washed away. I thought the pain of 2015 and 2016 was washed away as well. The pain of Game 163 in 2013, the one-game wild card in 2012, even the World Series loss in 2010. Not to mention everything that happened before that with the many, many bad seasons and the playoff losses to the Yankees in the 90s. I thought we weren't worrying about that anymore. But Chris Young is constructed a little differently than you and I. Mainly, he's 6'10" and was a professional baseball player, but also the mentality that he has about being a GM and about the Rangers. Saying there's unfinished business, letting that stick in your craw at all, that kind of shows how he is, thinking about things differently, how he is, still, motivated, still, not settling for anything. I think there's literally no unfinished business from 2023. And it would have been nice for the Rangers to win the division, but you can't tell me, looking back, that it didn't all work out for the best for the Rangers. Maybe if they won the division, they wouldn't have been as hungry in the playoffs. Maybe if they didn't have to make that flight across the country from Seattle to Tampa Bay to go play in that wild card game 2 days later, maybe they wouldn't have gone undefeated on the road like they did. Or maybe they would have. I don't know. It's impossible to say. But I am not thinking there is any part of the business that is unfinished from 2023. But I love that Chris Young thinks that there is. I love that kind of speaks to the mentality of this team of like, we're not satisfied with just one. It reminds me of a quote from Evan Carter, literally right after the Rangers won the World Series. The Rangers social media was interviewing him, talking about winning the World Series, just like, what's your message to the fans? And he says, job's not done. Job's not done, y'all. We're going to go out there and try and do it again. And I couldn't help but laugh when Evan Carter said that. Sweet summer child who had been in the big leagues all of 5 minutes saying, nope, job's not done. We just won the World Series, the first one in franchise history. Like, it's not done. It was done. The job was completed. Granted, there are other jobs now. There are new jobs, winning in 2024 and maybe in 2025 going for a three-peat, and 2026 going for 4 in a row, which I don't think has ever been done. But we're still way ahead of ourselves. That one was absolutely massive, life-changing for so many people, franchise-altering, like so many demons exercised, and it was so incredibly important that they get that one, that they get one in general. But I just couldn't help but laugh thinking about how this team is not just satisfied when the rest of us have been sitting here, when everyone else is whining about the lack of drama, the lack of content. Even as a content creator, it rolls off my back of the lack of transactions in what is supposed to be the biggest transaction week of the year at the winter meetings. But here I am just watching highlights of the World Series and of Marcus Semien hitting that game-sealing home run, of Josh Sborz spiking his glove, of Adolis Garcia's walk-off homer, of Corey Seager's game-tying homer, of just the beatdown in the ALCS Game 7. I'm watching a lot of that, and I'm pretty satisfied. Job's done. Job's done in my mind. I'm pretty satisfied with that. But again, the reason why that team was so successful was because they have this kind of mentality that is different than you and I. And I'm not saying that we should adapt that mentality at all. I think that's unhealthy for fans. I think it's going to lead to a lot of frustration. I mean, as someone who has cheered for a team that has won a whole lot of being not satisfied with anything less than a championship as an Alabama college football fan, it can be unhealthy. I mean, the most destructive group chat I'm in is my Bama Boys group chat. Before every game, we talk about, oh, we're going to lose. We're going to lose this game. Everything's going to lose. And even when we won national championships as Alabama, they aren't as satisfying. Nothing was nearly as satisfying as Texas Rangers winning it all for the first time ever. It is just a different feeling. And I hope that we as fans don't ever adopt that mentality, same as Chris Young, that we're pissed off with anything less than a championship. Because now that the Rangers have won it all, for me, it's kind of like my Dallas Maverick fan. Once Dirk got his ring, everything else after that is gravy. Everything else is just icing on the cake. Everything else the Rangers do from this point on is just sprinkles on top of the most delicious cake I've ever eaten in my entire life. They're not necessary. They're nice added flavor. But I already got exactly what I wanted. Or I guess more dessert after the best meal of my life is probably be a more accurate way to phrase that. So just because the Rangers have this mentality doesn't mean that we have to. And I worry about in 2 years or whatever, if the Rangers haven't won back-to-back championships or it's been 2 whole years since the Rangers have won it all, that we as fans don't necessarily have to have that same mentality of job's not done. Anything less than a championship is not good. It's good for the players and the coaches and everybody directly involved with the team to have that mentality. But as fans, it is significantly, monumentally less enjoyable to have that kind of mentality. Now, let's look a little bit at the draft news that came out last night, the draft lottery. The second draft lottery in MLB history happened. The Rangers were not a part of it because they will be picking 30th because the Texas Rangers won the World Series. Just in case you had forgotten. Now, the only other news that is really significant out of that is the Cleveland Guardians will be picking first for the first time in their history. The Reds also moved up in the draft to the second pick, despite having a winning record. The A's fell as far as they could, despite being one of the worst baseball teams I have ever seen. Same with the Royals, also dropped all the way to 6, which is just hilarious to me. And the A's, because they technically won one of the top 5 picks, they moved all the way to 4th. They will not be able to be involved in next year's draft lottery, no matter how terrible they are, which will be notoriously terrible. Mariners are picking 15th. The Astros are picking 28th, and the Rangers are picking 30th, with picks 31 and 32 going to the D-backs and Orioles because they had the Rookies of the Year. Hopefully next year, the Rangers will have the 30th pick and the 31st pick because Evan Carter or Wyatt Langford will be winning Rookie of the Year. That is the hope of the Rangers picking 30th and 31st. But again, it would be icing on top of a cake that has already been baked. Now, the Rule 5 draft is happening tonight. The Rangers likely won't pick anybody. There are a few guys who weren't protected on the Rangers 40-man roster who I think will be on the radar for certain teams to have, the top of which is a right-handed reliever, Anthony Hupi Tuio Natoa. I believe that is how it's pronounced, a former 30th round pick in 2019 by the Rangers. He is a right-hand reliever listed at 6 foot, 190 pounds. He is out of Hawaii as well. So the Rangers have signed a Hawaiian. They may be losing another Hawaiian in the draft in terms of right-handed relievers. He really put on a spectacular performance at the Arizona Fall League where he really turned some heads. He hasn't made it all the way up to Double-A. But in the Arizona Fall League, he pitched in 9 games, 9 2/3 innings, did not allow a single run, and struck out 10. Pretty solid performance, turned some heads. He's 22 years old. The Rangers just drafted him in 2019, and it kind of stinks that he had one of his years of development done because of COVID, and then he was drafted in 2019. So normally those pitchers don't pitch in 2019. So basically 2 years off the table, and the Rangers already had to make a decision on this guy who hadn't even been to Double-A yet. And they decided not to protect him on the 40-man roster. He throws in the upper 90s, and he could probably sit in somebody's bullpen for a full season for them to, stash him as a Rule 5 pick. He's definitely on people's radars for a guy who could even be the top pick in this MLB Rule 5 draft. But again, I don't think the Rangers will take anybody. Other guys who are potential losses. Dane Acker is an interesting guy, but again, injuries have really hampered him. The upside is there, but I don't see someone being able to keep him on their active roster for an entire season unless he has an injury and they can just stash him that way. And Winston Santos, I don't know if somebody's going to take a chance on him. He's got an interesting fastball, but again, the Rangers don't really have to worry that much about the Rule 5 because they have so many good players on their 40-man that they couldn't protect everybody. So I don't anticipate they're going to go out and try and get somebody in that Rule 5 draft. Now, coming up, we're going to look at the bigger picture of these winter meetings, why the AL West probably doesn't have much of a shakeup in them, and the big moves are going elsewhere outside of this Rangers division. Talk about all that and more in just a second. But first, it's word from our sponsors. Now, the winter meetings have been an absolute snooze fest so far this year. I mean, Kirby Yates, you saw my excitement at the top of this show that there was actually even something to talk about. I debated about making this show an entirely Kirby Yates show, but it's just, it's not that serious. I mean, Yates is solid, but again, it has just been such an entirely slow winter meetings, and it's pretty much all the fault of, well, 3 people. It's the fault of, I guess more than 3 people, but it centers around 3 players. Everyone's waiting for Shohei Ohtani to sign. Nobody knows anything outside of the little that Dave Roberts was talking about, which apparently he seemed to get in trouble about, which if Dave Roberts' comments of just saying that he met with Shohei and he thinks it went well is enough for him to not go there, that would be honestly, like, truly hilarious, and I would love it very much, because I don't want him to go to the Dodgers, because I would like the Rangers to become a dynasty, and the Dodgers signing the best player maybe in the history of baseball as a team that was already very good would be boring and not fun for everybody else. But also they're waiting on people are waiting on the Juan Soto trade and the Yoshinobu Yamamoto signing as well. Those are the top 3 moves that are holding up everything else. And there's a reason for that. It's because whoever doesn't get those moves is going to overpay somebody else as a result. That's how this always goes. I mean, the last time that the Rangers didn't get Shohei Ohtani, they spent a whole bunch of international bonus pool money on Julio Pablo Martinez. Now, granted, it's not going to be. It's going to be a little bit bigger of a splurge than whatever the $3 million in international bonus pool money that the Rangers had to spend that year. Maybe it was 5. I don't remember. Doesn't really matter. But that's why everything is holding up. And the thing that's confusing to me is why there are not more rumors about guys in the next tier of the market of Jordan Montgomery getting more rumors of, oh, this team's in on Jordan Montgomery or this team's in on Jordan Montgomery. I mean, it's basically been just kind of the Rangers and Yankees, and there's a little bit of talk about the Cardinals or maybe the Mets having interest, but again, it's all going to be dominoes. I mean, he's going to make a lot more money because some team missed out on signing Yamamoto or trading for Juan Soto or acquiring the Shohei Ohtani, and someone's going to pay him a whole lot more money. So that's why everyone is waiting around, and it's just kind of frustrating that nobody is signing. This is supposed to be the big content week. This is, for me personally, this is the last week of 5 shows a week. After this, we will be going to off-season mode. It's still 3 shows a week, maybe sometimes 4, depending on what news is breaking. But I've been kind of, unimpressed about what's happening. I mean, but the good news for the Rangers is they're reigning World Series champs. and they return basically their entire lineup outside of Mitch Garver. And again, they could fill that with one of the top prospects in all of baseball, or another prospect who's very good, or other guys who are young and talented. And so a DH hole is pretty easy to fill relatively. And the rest of the lineup is still locked up for the long term. And if they go into the rotation, go into opening day with the rotation they have right now, that's a fine, solid, serviceable rotation. Obviously, you'd like to add one more starter. And the bullpen, they just added an arm, and it's fine. But they're still the reigning champs. And there are a lot of people who are trying to keep up with the Rangers, the reigning champs, including the AL West. But it looks like the AL West is not making that many moves. I mean, I've talked about how the Mariners just shed $25 million in payroll and traded away one of their young, promising bats. I mean, it seems like it looked like the Mariners were going to spend more this year on their payroll than they had in years past. But that's looking like it might not be the case. I mean, Root Sports is having some issues. Their regional sports network, which is majority owned by the Mariners, 71%, 29% of it is owned by Warner Brothers. Also, Juan Soto is looking like he's going to be a Yankee, not a Mariner, which a Mariners trade made so much more sense. But again, $30 million is a lot for them. He's only on a contract for one more year, and they need more than just Juan Soto to fix their offense. They need a lot more bats, and it's looking like whatever rumors were people were mock trading Juan Soto to the Astros. That's not happening. But the Astros did shell out the first multi-year deal for a position player. They signed Victor Caratini, 2 years, $12 million. So looks like sayonara to Martin Maldonado, my favorite Astros catcher. Maybe Victor Caratini will learn from Martin Maldonado's lessons and not provoke players that are significantly better than him into going off against his team and making them call him daddy, like Adolis Garcia and Marcus Semien did. But hey, if he wants to follow in his footsteps, I am not going to, by any means, poo-poo that. I would actually very much encourage it. But it is looking like Yainer Diaz is going to be the everyday catcher. There's a bummer about losing Dusty Baker, because it seems like he was pushing for Martin Maldonado to start more over Yainer Diaz, who I think is actually very good, and Chas McCormick not making him an everyday player, which sadly looks like he might actually be pretty good. It looks like the Astros are going to actually be making some smart moves on who's starting in their lineup. But hey, they might lose Jose Altuve and Alex Bregman next season. So it might not end up mattering. And, the Mariners keep on pushing backwards. It looks like the only team that's tied to any of these top three guys, because I don't see there's any way that the Mariners sign Yamamoto, or why they would, because they need like 17 more bats. The only move of anybody in the AOS that's tied to any of the big three is possibly Shohei Ohtani returning to the Angels, which I think would absolutely objectively be the funniest possible outcome. All of this hand-wringing and whatnot of, oh my God, where is Shohei going to go? Oh, he's going to go to the Dodgers, make them a super team. Oh my God, he might go to the Blue Jays and make them unstoppable. Oh my God, he might go to the Cubs and they might actually be a new dynasty. And he just, nope, I want to go back to the Angels. And there's going to be nothing new there. And the Angels are going to be mid. And we're going to make the same Tungsten Armo Doyle jokes that we've been making for the last 5 years of Shohei's career, and it's going to be hilarious, and nothing's really going to change. I think, in my opinion, that would be the funniest possible outcome. But again, since Shohei is the best hitter on this market, and Juan Soto is the best hitter on the trade market, once those guys go, then that'll set the market, because I think Mitch Garver might honestly have a case to be the second best hitter on this market, which is more of a statement on the market than how much I believe in Mitch Garver. As much as I love him, and I think he's very good, that's more of a statement on, the rough state of the free agent hitter class this year. Last year was a lot better, and the year before it, Marcus Semien and Corey Seager were pretty darn good on that market. But the only other move of significance is that the Boston Red Sox and Yankees made a trade for Alex Verdugo, headed to the Yankees. It feels like those two organizations are way too chummy. It supports my theory that the new best rivalry in Major League Baseball is the Rangers and the Astros, though if the Rangers end up pushing the Astros back into the dirt and making them have another 5-year rebuild and that rivalry dies down, I would be okay with that. But those teams just seem too chummy. I mean, the Rangers and Astros aren't making any trades. That's not happening. There's no way in heck the Rangers would make any trade with the Astros unless it was just fleecing them, which would be a fun turn of events. But anyway, that is going to do it for today's show. Unfortunately, I wish I could drum up more news for you, but alas, I am not Ken Rosenthal. I am not Jeff Passan. I cannot break news. If I could, I would on this show. But hey, maybe next time we talk, maybe the Rangers will have traded for Juan Soto or signed Jordan Montgomery, or who knows what's going to happen, because it seems like absolutely nobody does. That's going to do it for today's show. I have no more unfinished business, unlike Chris Young and the Rangers. And until next time, don't forget to enjoy World Series champion Texas Rangers baseball.